Welcome everyone, a warm welcome to you all. Thank you very much for coming along today. I know for some of you it wasn't easy, but I really wanted to say from the bottom of my heart that I appreciate the fact that you made the effort to come along. As the sign says behind me, this is the Southern Shoalhaven Community-led Resilience Forum. And the first thing I'll say is this is not a bunch of experts telling you what you should or should not do. This is a bunch of people from the community sharing their experience with you, and some people from government and agencies talking about what they do. Just wanted to get that out there straight up. So you all hopefully got a program in front of you, no doubt.
Yeah, it's working.
It's a bit of a shame we're inside on this beautiful sunny day. It would have been nice to be outside today, but we're here together, that's the main thing. There's a couple of introductions that I'd like to do. My name's Alistair, or everyone just calls me Al, and I work for St Vincent de Paul Society. I'm the Bushfire Recovery and Community Development Coordinator for the Shoalhaven. Vinny's has been in this space, in the bushfire recovery space, in New South Wales since about middle of 2020, after the fires came through. We had a person up in Kempsey, and then gradually Vinny's has rolled out this program to 4 different areas. And the Shoalhaven was seen as one of the priority areas, obviously because 80% of our LGA was burnt, and we had a lot of loss and a really big impact. So Vinny's decided that we would do things a little bit differently. Rather than come in and do immediate response, we would be here for the longer term, because all the research shows that recovery from such large natural disasters takes between 5 and 10 years. So this is a first for Vinny's, and holding a forum like this is a first for Vinny's as well. And I'm proud to be part of an organisation that is brave enough to do things like this. It takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there in the community, and I'm really proud I've got an organisation that backs me 100% with that. So thank you, Vinny's. To say a couple of little introductions I'd like to do just while I'm here. I'd like to introduce my manager, John Fennick, who's sitting there. He's the manager for the Vinny's Bushfire Recovery Program. Also I'd like to introduce he's on the panel today. So on your program you'll see there's 2 panels. John's convening one of them. I'd also like to introduce Bronwyn Adcock, who's here somewhere. Are you there, Bronwyn? Yep, who's everyone, a lot of locals will know. She's a local journalist and writer, and wrote a fantastic book called Currawang. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. She'll be convening one of the panels as well. Some other couple of people I'd like to introduce. We've got a little organisation here in the Shoalhaven, basically, that meets weekly. We're a bunch of agencies and NGOs and community people that meet every week just to sort of bounce off each other how we're going in the recovery space, what we're noticing, things like that. And the lady who organises that is a lady by the name of Andrea Forsyth. She's a fantastic lady. She's really good at getting everyone together. She works for Shoalhaven Council. I'm going to embarrass you, Andrea, and just say thank you very much. She is the Community Recovery Officer at Shoalhaven Council and does a fantastic job. She's also got another 2 ladies that are, in my eyes, angels. I will say that, Janice Gordon and Jenny Healy, who's not here today. They're the Community Outreach Officers, and many of you will know these fabulous ladies. They work at the Shoalhaven Hub, and they're there pretty much every week. And if you want to just drop in for a cuppa or a chat, they're always there. So I just want to pay my respects to those 3. A couple of people that you won't know, a lady called Hannah Bennett, who's a new local emergency management officer. She's down the back. She's replacing Kim White. She just came on board about a month ago. Yeah, not so long ago. So welcome, Hannah. Hopefully you can catch up with her for a cuppa if you want to talk to her. A couple of other people. I think she's here, a lady called Karen Richardson, who works for Anglicare. I didn't see her come in the door. I'm not sure she's here, but she's also working with Anglicare, doing equivalent to my job there. Great lady. 2 ladies also, Bronwyn Lunt, who was on the registration desk, and Jamie Rose, who are both mental health clinicians in the disaster space. Just wanted to acknowledge them and the great work they've done. And someone who's not here is Monica Mudge, who many of you do know, works with Treading Lightly. Sadly, she's got some personal reasons she couldn't be here, but I just wanted to pay my respects and thank her for her tireless effort that she's done throughout the whole recovery space. When we got together, there was a group of about 8 of us who got together when we had this idea of putting on a forum or an event where communities could share their resilience stories or their preparedness stories. We got together and we all sat down and we thought, well, what's the need? Why are we doing this? First question you've got to ask yourself. And the thing that came up between the 8 of us who've been working both in recovery but also community members, some from Little Forest, some from Conjola, we said people need to feel heard and they need to be safe. And they're the 2 things that we identified as the number 1 need. You need to be safe and you need to be heard. Because without those 2 things, you can't connect with each other. You can't connect with your community without safety and being heard. We've all been to public meetings where we feel intimidated, we feel scared, and only the loudest people and the most obnoxious people are heard. It's a very common thread. This is not that space. I will tell you now. This is a space where everybody will be heard. Everyone will be safe. And that kind of moves me on to, you'll see up beside me on either side, we developed from basically those couple of meetings, we've developed some principles that we want to run this forum by. And they're what I call the foundation principles. And you've got them in front of you, hopefully. And I'd just like to remind everybody, and I'll read them out now so it's clear in your head. The first principle was around feeling safe. It's your obligation while you're here to take care of yourself and to take care of everyone in the room. So that is the number 1 principle. And having said that, if you do feel at any stage, because there will be talk about fire stories and you will see pictures that may be triggering for you, we do have a chill out zone area there that's kind of cordoned off. It's just a relaxing space where you can go and sit down and have some time out if you need to. Anyway, the second principle is being heard. And when we say being heard, there's a saying going around that says, ask for what you need and offer what you can. We aren't asking any more than that. If you feel like you need to step out, please do so. The third principle we had was connections. We'd really like you, while you're here today, to focus on the similarities and not the differences. We all know we have differences, and it's the differences that divide us. It's the similarities that keep us connected. And the last principle is compassion. I'd like you to lead with curiosity and not with judgment. It's very easy for humans to judge. We do it well. We all judge each other. It's a human trait. I do it. Everyone does it. But while you're here, try and suspend your judgment and ask yourself, that's curious, I wonder about that, rather than judging it. And within those principles, we have basically some little sayings, which is listen with attention, just like in class really. Speak with intention. Think about what you're going to say. And take care of the group, which means take care of each other. While you're here in this room, we're together for 5 hours, so we will be a bit of a community by the end of that. You'll get to know each other a bit. And some of you are already close friends, some of you are neighbours, and you probably get to reacquaint yourself with them. So they're basically the principles of the forum. So just to sort of run through the forum today, we're going to have a very dear friend of mine, Uncle Vic Channell's going to come along and give us a welcome to country, which I'm looking forward to. And then we're going to move into our keynote speaker, which is Major General Peter Dunn. That'll go until around 10:30. He's speaking for 30 minutes. And then we're going to break for a morning tea and a cuppa. And then we'll move into our first panel. So the panels will go for about an hour. The idea behind the panels, the first panel is what we've titled community-led resilience. So it's other people from other communities, and there's, on the program you'll see there's people from the local community around here in Little Forest, there's people a little bit further afield, Kangaroo Valley, and then we've got a gentleman from the mid-north coast who's going to talk to us about what they've done to improve their community's resilience. We're going to talk about some of the challenges, some of the things they found easy, some of the things they found hard. They're going to be pretty short, spiky little presentations. They're only 10 minutes. And we ask, if you can, during those, just hold off your questions until the end, because we will have ample time at the end to ask questions. So if you can just let us go through all the presentations, and then we'll pass the mic around and you can ask questions as well. We do have a couple of set questions which people have put in before the forum started. And then we're moving, have a little break after that, 15 minutes, and then we're moving into the second panel, which John's going to convene. And that's about community-supported resilience. So it's sort of more of the agencies, government bodies, those sort of people that kind of support people that want to go through that resilience and that preparedness journey, I guess. Then we're going to have lunch. That'll go for an hour, and there's opportunity to chat and catch up. And then the last half an hour of the day, we're going to put it back out to you and ask you where to from here. What do you see? What should we do next? We've got some ideas about what we want to do, but we really want to hear from you. That's why we're here. So without further ado, I might ask Uncle Vic if he'd like to come up and give us a welcome to country. Thanks, Vic.
Thank you, Al. I was going to do something a little bit different today and talk about connections and things, but a lot of these words that are written in front of us represent a lot about what's going on or what's happened over the last couple of years and the connections and the resilience that I've seen in community and the compassion from organisations. So before I start, I'd like to say, Tamaga Bumalaga, Yiniwan. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name's Vic Channel. I'm a Marmarine man. My ancestors were Marmarine people, this area. So Wolawani Yiniwan, Wolawani Marmarine, Wolawani Nula, Wolawani Yuan Bagan. So welcome to Ulladulla, Marmarine country, Yuan nation. We stand here today on Marmarine people's country, my ancestors' place. My connection to this country has been up and down through this coast. I welcome you here today and I wish you all a safe journey. Now back to my connection with the St Vinny's bushfire recovery. Over 12 months ago now, Alistair approached me and asked me to do a community forum up at Nerriga about cultural burning. I've been a big part of this community for over 10 years now. I've represented the local Aboriginal Land Council for 8 years as Deputy Chair. I've been on several boards and community engagement committees. But what I do at this present stage over the last couple of years has really opened my eyes. And working with Alistair and a lot of other organisations to help not only people heal, but be out on country and hill country, see and hear people's stories, but most of all to see how strong and how well they've all come together as a community to support each other and to rebuild. It's hard going to places that have been severely impacted by a catastrophic fire, and what I've been doing, it's hard for me to educate people in a safer way we can use fire in a better practice. It's very hard for me to teach these lessons because there's a lot of knowledge involved, but this method is effective. And to see people walk away at the end of the day with a big smile on their face and feel relieved and knowing that there is safer and easier practices that we can use on country, not only to heal country, but to heal ourselves and look after ourselves. And that's what it's all about. But my involvement with St Vinny's, and I thank Alistair very much, because as far as I stand, there's not enough of you guys out there that stand and support the community as thickly as what you do. And it really needs to keep going. It's not a short-term thing, it's a lifetime thing. So to see you guys all standing here today, doing what you do, supporting communities through hard times, giving people like me opportunities to build connections, relationships and be out on the country and put a smile on people's faces, that's what makes a big difference to us all, I think. So thank you all for being here today and enjoy your day.
Thanks, Uncle. Yeah, I'd like to welcome Peter Dunn up to the lectern. And Peter's active member of the Emergency Leaders for Climate Action. As you know, Peter's got an Order of Australia. He's got a lived experience of going through 2 large fires in his time. I'm really grateful that Peter could come along today and talk to you about what is happening in the leadership space in regards to disaster preparedness and also disaster recovery, and what some of the, I guess, very well credentialed people that are part of that Emergency Leaders for Climate Action are doing in that space. So I'd like you to put your hands together and welcome Peter.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Alistair, and Vinnie's for running the forum and inviting me along. First, I'd like to respond to Uncle Ben. I'd like to thank you for welcoming us to the country of the great Yuin nation, and I would like to say that all of us here pay our respects to all of the elders of that Yuin nation, all of the First Nations people, but in particular your elders past, present and emerging. I'd also recognise that your land was taken and never ceded. I want to recognise also all my friends in this audience. It's been a fabulous homecoming in a sense, because Lake Conjola was our home, and there are many people that I've not seen for quite some time, since about 2020. So thank you for making me feel welcome, and it's just a pleasure to be back here at Osdala once again. Well, when Alistair rang me up and said, will you come and do a keynote at this session, we had a chat about what Vinnie's is trying to do here, and I said to him at the time, it absolutely resonates with what we are doing in the Emergency Leaders for Climate Action. So to kick off, what I'd like to do is just give you 30 seconds on what the Emergency Leaders for Climate Action are doing, and I'm going to then talk a bit about the impact of climate change. Now, some of you there might be saying, there's so much about this, how come we've come to a community resilience gathering and some roosters got up to talk about climate change? And I would say to you that this is why we're here, and this is the absolute reason that we're here, and that there are still many, many people in governments and institutions and the like that need to pay attention to this, because as the slide behind me says, our institutions, we in ELCA believe, have been overtaken by climate change. And the bottom line, therefore, is that our institutions have to change, we have to change. So this is very much about looking forward from today, using the examples of yesterday, and saying, where do we need to go in order to make sure that we are actually safe? ELCA launched before the Black Summer fires. In fact, Greg Mullins, former Commissioner of New South Wales Fire and Rescue, himself, other emergency chiefs, the former chief, because I was the chief in the ACT, got together and said, people aren't listening to what's happening out there, to what agencies such as the Bureau of Meteorology are saying, etc., and they're not changing fast enough. And of course, our colleagues who were in as leaders of the various emergency services, including all the emergency services here, were unable to speak out because the government said that it's not up to you to criticise government policy. This is governments of all persuasions. It's not up to you to criticise government policy and say we're not doing enough or we're not doing the right things. They were constrained because they work for government. So we were actually asked by a number of serving emergency chiefs to start saying something on their behalf. We were talking about it anyway. So we said, well, there's a meeting of the minds, let's do it. And we thought we would get out there and we'd make a few statements and that would be it. And here we are, actually 5 years later, and we're doing more work than ever before. Because even though governments have changed, community understanding of climate change has changed, we still find that we need to work assiduously on actually distilling what it means for agencies and for communities. And we very quickly found ourselves in the space of talking about communities. And as I say up there, we actually get to the point where communities are the centre of what we are saying. And I'll explain that more as I go on. We write reports. There are 2 reports up there that we've just produced this year, one on the floods and one on the grass fires. And you've no idea how thrilled we were to hear New South Wales RFS extend the fire danger period down south in Bega Valley, etc., and a number of other areas, Snowy Mountains area, because of the risk of grass fires, because our powder keg report talks about exactly that. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that we're the only ones that came up with this brilliant deduction, this being a huge amount of growth. Not at all, and RFS is right across this, but we certainly need to put out reports and put data out there that helps everybody understand the sort of situations that we face. So that's the sort of thing that we are on about, and it takes a lot of our time to produce. Now, the question that's posed today is, has climate change overtaken our institutions? And we would argue that it definitely has. Why? Well, the disasters we're facing now are very different to those from the past. For a start, look at the area that was covered by the Black Summer fires. I mean, Alistair mentioned over 80% of Shoalhaven was burnt. In fact, I think the figure's about 87%, it's almost pushing 90%. There are a lot of facts and figures that float around, but something like 187 bridges were burnt in the Shoalhaven. All the road signs were destroyed just about. So we now see that these events happen from Queensland all the way down through Victoria, crossing the Kangaroo Island, other places as well, simultaneously, whereas that never used to be the case. And that's fire. With the floods that we've been witnessing and are still witnessing, we've seen some communities ravaged by flood 5 times. And this is just absolutely disastrous, to coin a word. And we are seeing the potential for this to continue more frequently and at greater intensities than we've seen before. So we believe that we all need to pay attention to this, and we believe that we need to recognise that our government institutions, all of them, were designed to operate in more benign times. We take a lot of time to make decisions, usually for good reason. But we now need to accelerate this process, and we need to find another mechanism to allow us to deal with the climate in which we live. And even if we went to zero emissions tomorrow, we would still have 30 to 50 years of this very unstable climate situation that we're going to have to face. And so our kids and our grandkids and great-grandkids are going to have to deal with this situation for some time. So we need to get it right. So fundamentally, things have changed. The amount of damage that these climate-induced events create is absolutely huge. And that's changed also. But this increase in frequency means that this damage is occurring again and again before we can get it fixed. And we no sooner get to a point where we think we're on top of what's happened when something else happens again. And that's the sort of driving force that we believe needs to be considered when we see whether our institutions are fit for purpose or not. Now, this is not a criticism of any individual at all, because every government level, and I've worked at federal, state and with local governments, Every individual I've talked to wants to make it better, but our systems are missing something because they can't move fast enough. Now, straight away, a few of you will be saying, oh, well, of course it's money, and that's true, to a degree. And I'm going to cover that in a moment, because, in a little while, because there are things that we can do to actually provide more money to our good people in institutions and in governments to actually make the decisions we need. But we do have to get a mindset change, and this is going to be the hardest, the most difficult thing of all to do. Now remember, I'm talking from the emergency management climate action perspective. There are some 37 of us now, there's 33 of us live, there's 37 of us odd now, and moving up to 40. There are hundreds and hundreds of years of experience there, and every one of the members of ELCA is saying there does need to be a mindset change. So I just want to draw a line under that, not criticising people for waking up in the morning and saying, oh, let's go about our day and really try and screw over a few communities. That's absurd. That is not happening. But we change our minds and we need resources to do it. Now, we have had, after every disaster, major disaster, an inquiry of some sort. And I've only picked out 3 here to try and illustrate some of the problems that we're facing in moving forward into the future. And in particular, I would note that each of these recommendations, each of these inquiries produced very significant recommendations, and recommendations that were deduced from very rigorous investigation. Now, the Royal Commission into National Natural Disasters, led by Mark Vincent, produced a series of recommendations, 80 in fact, that made really good sense. Mark and his team came to Ulladulla, came to Conjola. They met, certainly I know Mark from my service days, and we had a couple of sessions about what might need to be considered in terms of recommendations from the Royal Commission. But that was just a short private session. That was good to catch up with him also. But they produced 80 recommendations and they were well thought out. 16 of those recommendations have been implemented. Of the remaining recommendations, the majority have been accepted in principle. Now, I ask you, what does it mean to accept a recommendation in principle? Does that mean that I go along to a conference and say, oh yeah, no, we agree with that. Basically, that's right. Yeah, we've got the picture here. And leave it at that? Is that what it means? Oh, I think it does. Or does it mean it's being dealt with? Having worked in government and been given these recommendations, for example, post the 2003 fire disaster in the ACT, which is my job to implement the recommendations from the coronial inquiry and the other independent inquiry into that fire, I know exactly what it means. Yeah, we agree, but we won't fund it. So 80 recommendations, 16 implemented, others wafting around in the breeze. The New South Wales Bushfire inquiry, Dave Owen's inquiry, spent a lot of time in the Shoalhaven and produced some fantastic recommendations. I mean, ones that would really make a difference to us here in this room, and having been through that disaster myself with my wife, it really would be fantastic to think that we can go through and tick off all those recommendations. If you look it up on the website, you'll find that there was a quarterly report issued, one not so long ago, about the achievement of those recommendations. I would put it to you that most of them are pretty high level. And the ones that really impact communities aren't being dealt with as rapidly as they should be. Opinion of ELCA. So you might disagree. But it's being implemented. All of those recommendations were accepted, but it is necessarily, under the current bureaucracy, taking a long time to do so. The flood inquiry is backed up on top of that. Suddenly, we're implementing the recommendations of the Bushfire inquiry, and now we have massive floods in the northern rivers, western New South Wales, etc. And we have a new set of recommendations. Some of the recommendations are exactly the same between the two inquiries. But now we're being backed up on that. So this workload and this demand for money, demand for activity to implement recommendations is building up and up and up and getting buried. There were 28 recommendations coming out of the flood inquiry. 6 have been accepted. 22 were accepted in principle. And I can stand here and tell you that this very day we are still building houses in floodplains in Western Sydney. There is a complete new development going in. What's the answer to that? Spend billions of dollars, this is the previous government, and raise the level of the Warradamba Dam. It is an engineering fact and a scientific fact that's not going to help. But while I stand here, the tradies are out there bashing up houses in the floodplains. Now, this is what I mean about the fact that climate change has overtaken our institutions. Because we don't or shouldn't be doing that. And it's the same with bushfire protections, and same with listening to what is needed in the communities all over. So we have these recommendations. I'm going to return to these because I'm going to ask you in due course after you leave here to go and have a look at them, because I think these recommendations, which are very, very good recommendations, I think you'll find that that gives us an answer to where we need to go in the future. Now, not only aren't the recommendations necessarily being implemented immediately across the board, but I'll just give you 3 examples of where we really need to get these implemented. The shot of the beach up there, it's a waterway, not far from here, was used as an evacuation route for all the people who were trapped in the 2019 fires at a little town called Conjola Park in Lake Conjola. One of the recommendations that came out, not just from Conjola, but from other situations on the south coast, was that where there are waterways, we should be using those as the other road in. If there's only one road in and one road out, but there's a waterway, then we should be making sure that those waterways are navigable. It's set up to actually operate as an evacuation route. Tick, good idea. I know of many communities where that has not happened at all, and there is no evacuation plan to actually get to the beach if you are trapped and can't get to a state government run or a local council run government evacuation centre. So there's something that's not happening. Below that is a shot I took about a week ago down at Congo in Eurobodalla Shire. Congo was lucky, it was evacuated during the fires, but Congo was lucky because they had one road in from the north and one road in from the south. As you can see from that slide, the northern entry road has been closed. So it now only has one road in through very heavily forested areas. Why has the other road been closed? This is after the fires, when in fact the Royal Commissions and inquiries say if you can get 2 roads in, one out, then you must have that. This is an historic land dispute between the council, a landowner, and there's an environmental element to it about whether trees get trimmed or not. And essentially, the landowner who has the trees on his property is not prepared to pay the insurance that's required to allow that road to continue. Now, there's more to it than that, but it's a bureaucratic debate, and that road has now been closed. Already, on 2 occasions, emergency services vehicles have not been able to get into Congo from the northern route because the drivers of those vehicles and the crews weren't aware that it was closed. They're aware about it now, but twice we've had that occur in Congo. The pile of timber on the beach in the other photograph is down at Turos Head, where I now live. The beaches, the mainstream beaches there, are covered in timber that has been washed down the Turos River and it has come from the floods. from the fires, I mean, and the floods brought the timbers down. Part of the psychological progress forward after a disaster is to see that we're moving forward and to see that we are returning to our normal way of life. When the three main swimming beaches are covered in timber, you can't. The surf lifesavers can't do their work properly, the kids can't play footy on the beach, and any paddlers, kayakers, paddleboard operators and the like have difficulty whenever a big tide comes in and washes the timbers out onto the near beach area and then washes the shore. The recommendations in the inquiries are that you've got to move this, you've got to have clean-up operations and you've got to go forward. Now, these things aren't happening because of either bureaucracy or money. And they're things that we can control. Now, with the type of disasters that we are facing now because of climate change, we really need to have some expectations that allow us to plan for situations in the future. There's a saying in emergency services that I learned very quickly when I was the Commissioner in the ACT, is that there'll never be enough blue lights to go around. And that's never been more true than now. We'll never have enough emergency services. We'll never be able to give the RFS enough equipment, more importantly, enough people to do everything that they would like to do. Same with the State Emergency Service, ambulance services, and the police. But we need to expect that that be the case and not be surprised. We don't have to like it, but it's really the reality. The next reality is that we're going to lose power. Until such time as we take steps, and I'm going to point out a few in a moment that we can take, and some have already been taken, we should expect that we're going to lose power. Communications. Now, all of us in this room, I'm sure, have experienced now, either friends or closely ourselves, being without power and therefore without communications, with mobile towers down, and when you do get the message, because you're listening to it sitting in your car, listening to the car radio and listening to the ABC emergency broadcast, they say, get on, look at the app, look at the app, look at the app. Well, that's great if you can get the app, but you can't. And we're still going down that way. So we've got to expect not to have comms. Our kids were down at Congo when the fire set, they were evacuated. We didn't know where they were for 3 days. And I know that's a common experience here in this room, where loved ones were somewhere. And of course, our kids didn't know where we were. And this is something that we have to think about and say, this is going to happen again. Now, I'm not trying to be alarmist here, I'm saying, let's be real about this, because we can't change the infrastructure fast enough to allow us to have this problem solved. We will feel abandoned. Look at what happened in Lismore. Look at the headlines up there, particularly at the Willowmarn. I've been up in the Northern Rivers and South Queensland, South Brisbane, after the floods. I was up there helping some of the NGOs talk to their people and advise about flood relief, how best to go about that. And it was exactly the same up there. And it's the same everywhere. There is a sense of abandonment. Why? Well, go back to the point where I said that we cover such a huge area. Local government agents, officers, can't cover that area. They've also got to get the roads open, they've got to get rubbish cleared, and they've got to get services restored. So they're totally engulfed in the disaster as well. Not to mention the fact that a whole lot of people that work in the councils have lost their homes, been flooded, etc., etc. So I have to say I've got to be very fair about this, because there simply isn't a magic silver bullet that can solve this problem. And we will feel abandoned, and we need to do better. Local communities will be called on for recovery. This is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. But in order for that to occur, there has to be a two-way street between governments and the communities. And I shall return to this in a moment. Mental health is much talked about, with good reason. because communities do need to have the capacity to administer mental health first aid themselves. I had counselling after the 2019 fires. My wife did, my family did, our friends did, and I'm so glad that we did. Because if we'd not done that, I think we'd be in a very dark space today. So we really need to take this on board. I know it gets talked about a lot, and it's often an easy fix too, because you can outsource that. You can get a mental health provider, pay them some money, and they can run workshops. We actually need to do something a bit different, we believe. So, the first point up there is the ALCA, party political broadcast, if you like, because fundamentally you can't have a discussion about this without saying we've got to reduce emissions. Enough on that for the moment. What we need to do is to see our local governments properly resourced. We cannot expect change if we do not get the resourcing that is necessary to make these changes. They also, local governments and state governments too, need to see communities as partners. I start to get a bit antsy when I hear the term community engagement. Now, I think it is community enlistment and it is partnership with the communities. Now, in order for that to occur, there needs to be some loosening of control from local government, state government. The communities need to be given more flexibility and more leeway to lead things themselves. Remember, I started off by saying this is because climate change is making these disasters so widespread, so intense, and so frequent that we have to think about this as the possible way ahead. And of course, this is what this gathering is today. Now, we've got to become partners, not just engaged. The last point is the thing that I reckon will be the hardest, and it will be very difficult for us to get the old ideas out of people's heads and get the new ideas into their thinking. And if we're going to have a partnership, I'll give you an example of the sort of thing that I mean, and I'll give more examples in a moment. But the sort of thing is that when the community says this is what they need, then that is accepted, provided that is based on good consultation within the community, then that is accepted as being the way forward for that community. There's guidance from council, of course there is. There have to be approvals and things. But the mission then is to actually achieve that for the community. And therefore it means that it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. What's good for one community might be completely different in another community because their priorities will be different. So we have to develop this partnership in order to cover the ground, in order to enlist the communities into what is a fight for our survival and well-being and health against climate-induced weather, extreme weather disasters. And that's a big ask. But we as communities should be demanding this now. What sort of things would this lead to? Well, if I, as I've done, go through the Royal Commission in great detail, and I was an expert witness to the Royal Commission. I made major submissions to the Bushfire inquiry. I was involved on the periphery of the flood inquiry. If I was to go through all their recommendations and say, what does this mean at community level, I'd say right from the get-go, here are a number of things that we should be doing, or could be doing, let me put it that way, because it's not one size fits all. Here are things that we could be doing in order to improve our resilience and to make us feel safer. I put the Community First Responders program up there first because this is what's happening as a result of the floods up in the Northern Rivers. Do you remember the criticism of the community for taking risks in rescuing people? I ask you, we have an elderly couple trapped on a veranda, not even in a roof space, 400 metres away, in raging water, and I've got a tinny, and I can get there and back. Am I going to go and get those people? Of course we are. Of course we are. One of the amazing things in that actual report was that the SES was criticised for not following government guidelines in conducting swift water rescue. And in the examples that were given when I looked into it, they were where SES volunteers, just literally, with the best knowledge they had at hand and the best equipment they had at hand, raced in and saved people. It's going to happen. Now, that's the SES criticised. The community was criticised as well. So let's get over that. It's going to happen. That's what we want to happen, because we're going to go and help our fellow man, woman. So we could be developing a community first responders program. RFS SES are highly trained, skilled people that get deployed all over the state now. We need a local community response capability. And you should not have to do 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks of training to actually get to that point. Community hazard reduction. I'm working with a community down south at the moment who for 5 years has been trying to get some hazard reduction done. The RFS agrees that it should be done. But on 3 letters so far returned, because the Progress Association has been writing for asking for this to be done, the local brigades asked it to be done, it comes back saying, look, you're a low priority, we haven't got the resources. Well, Taftler thought it was a low priority in 2018 too, until it got hammered. Climate change has changed that game. So we need to be actually taking those projects on at a community level, with guidance of course. But we've got to be able to do that, and we probably need money to do it. Coastal erosion, sea level rise is an issue in the Shoalhaven. It's an issue in other coastal areas. Taking steps in that as well. Emergency communications, critical, given what I said before. Microgrids, the Boiling Point battery is a great example of where we could be going, but it's taking a very long time to spread to other communities. Rebuilding in resilient ways with the right materials. Now I'm going to leave that to Webby to talk about later, because he's a lived experienced person on this, and others here in the room too. But we should be supporting this from a government level. Recovery hubs. What we're seeing up in the Northern Rivers now is, me to finish, I'd have to do it, for the Northern Rivers, is that we have government recovery centres and, if you like, outreach arms. And that's really important, that the communities then are supported rather than contested in that space. Here are some more. The list goes on, but I've pulled these out of the recommendations of those inquiries and the Royal Commission. So what I'm suggesting is we, in order to build our resilience, can turn to these accepted recommendations, albeit not implemented, and so we as a community demand that these things be implemented. And we want to partner in helping to implement them. It is not something to leave up to Sydney, or Nowra, or Maria, or any of the other centres, Bega. It's not up to those people to implement it by themselves. It's up to all of us to A, demand that it happens, and B, let it go ahead. It's going to cost money, as I said. And so somebody's sitting here saying, oh, for goodness sake, Peter, it's pie in the sky. Every year, $200 million is set aside by the government for disaster relief and mitigation. $3 million goes towards mitigation, right? And $97 million goes towards recovery. Let's shift that around. And we're starting to see it. We're starting to see it. Okay? It is actually, the dial is moving. So there is money there that we can get that should go to LGAs to allow us as communities to partner with the governments and move forward in our resilience. I think most of you would know now after the election that our fossil fuel extraction companies pay almost no tax. They're making massive profits, and why shouldn't we have some of that money to come into our communities? And the third point up there is that every year for the last, it started a decade ago, every year $11 billion is given to fossil fuel extraction companies in subsidies of some form. Could be rail lines, could be tax exemptions, it's all port support and things like that. Now, they're causing a problem, so we need to actually start to have them pay the piper. There is money available if we have the will to get it and if the community demands it. And we can afford to buy nuclear-powered submarines. I'm not going to get into the argument, but you can afford to do that, $385 billion over 30 years. We can afford to get some of these projects that I've talked about up. Finally, Al's just said, thank goodness. Let me just summarise it, and if I can, we have to partner communities with government, and this is very different to engagement. We've got to be enlisted as part of the solution, not part of the problem. We've got a roadmap there because we've got a whole lot of recommendations that have been accepted but not funded. So they've been rigorously worked through. So we've got a real rich list there to pick off to see what suits our communities to move forward. We can become agitators. There's nothing wrong with being an agitator. When I joined Emergency Relief for Climate Action, I didn't expect that I was suddenly a climate activist, but I became one. And actually, there are times we've got to speak up. And I think we're at that time because we've got to look forward and we've got to move forward. And doing these things means that we are progressing forward and we're going forward on a sensible pathway. Certainly, get some money coming from the extractors, but for this to work, you have to be connected. On that last point, I'll finish and you can see why, when Al rang me up and said, will you come and talk at this gathering, I went, this is exactly what the Emergency Relief for Climate Action is saying. We want more fire services, rural and urban, and SES, we want increased, ambulance we want increased, more people, more equipment, and we want more community-centric resilience activities happening. That's our platform, and that's what we talk to governments about at the moment, and we have been talking to them. Now, there we go. Thank you. I think it's up to us, and thank you for giving us the vehicle to go forward on.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Speaker back up. Thank you, Peter. That was really thought-provoking. And just to say quickly that obviously a mind shift is needed, not only from our leaders and our governments, but also from us. I worked for local government for 18 years. I love local government, I really did. But they're under-resourced terribly. They do need support from all levels of government, but they also need support from their communities. It's really important that we don't just turn into a blaming community, everything's council's problem. We also need to work with them. It's really important. Thank you very much. Just a couple of things that I forgot to mention. Kat is over here, the lady in the white sitting here. She's from Creative Catfish, and she's doing what's called a graphic harvest. We were hoping to get it up on the board so you could see it happening, but she's drawing what we're talking about. You can see little pictures, but we will get it up on the overhead. It's just a really good way of putting words into pictures. I'm a sort of picture person, I like seeing that sort of thing. So yeah, she's doing that. Just wondering what she's doing over there. Over in the back corner there, just behind Andrea, there's a whiteboard over there. We're calling it a parking lot. On your table, you'll notice there's some sticky notes and a couple of pens. If you have an idea, if you have a thought, put it on paper and stick it up there on the end. We're going to basically collect all of those at the end of the day and we're going to compile them, and they're going to go out to everyone who wants to hear them. So agencies, government, community, anyone, we'll put it out there and we'll send it back to you as participants at the forum as well.